On Halloween night 2004, in Napa Valley, California, a frantic 911 call is being made in the middle of the night. The person online with dispatch is giving details about a gruesome series of crimes that have just occurred. Once caught, the perpetrator's identity and motivations for committing these horrendous acts would send shockwaves through the community. Hello everyone, and welcome to Lisa Explains It All, a true crime, mystery, and art history podcast. And welcome to episode 7, the Napa Valley Murders. This case is so disturbing and honestly rage-inducing. There is going to be a lot to talk about for sure. But now, for the first segment of today's episode, per usual, I am going to head on over to Reddit. I've got my chai tea latte with me, aka my bavanda of the day, and let's go. And someone asked the question, quote, "As it's nearly Halloween, how about we share some creepy stories? I'll go first." And I have not read this yet, so I'm going to react unscripted here. So let's go. When I was about 13, my mom and dad invited round our previous neighbors from the block of flats we lived in until I was 5 years old. Anyway, I'd been sent to bed but could still hear everyone talking about this and that until the woman neighbor said, "Hey, Diggsy's mom, do you remember when Diggsy used to complain that there was someone in his room? Well, there's a family that's just moved in to the floor above who have a 3-year-old son. He is complaining about the exact same things Diggsy did." This creeped me out. I had no recollection of any of this. So the next day, asked my mum. Her first reaction was, "You don't remember?" Then she told me all about the weird stuff that used to happen. Footsteps up and down the hall, things going missing and stuff. She said the final thing to happen was when she was listening to a record one day and it started to slow down, like someone was holding a finger gently on the platter till it finally came to a stop. My mom said she snapped at this point and started shouting, "Will you leave us the F alone?" As soon as she said this, the record went straight back to playing normally. Nice job, Mom. And we never experienced anything again. I've never experienced anything like that since. And these days, I'm quite skeptical of such stories. But I believe my mum. Strangest thing is how I found out about it, from someone else 10 years later experiencing something similar. So Reddit, Halloween is almost upon us. Now's your chance to share something freaky. That was cute. Okay, next story. Okay, this is 100% true, and even though most people I tell this to in real life don't believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood, and holding a huge kitchen knife. Holy cow. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way, trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing that..." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing, and she said, quote, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. Okay, and last Reddit story for today. So my mom remarried about 2 years ago. My dad died when I was 12, so she had been widowed for over 10 years. This new relationship was very whirlwind, with them meeting, dating, and getting married within 3 months. I didn't know much about the guy, but my mom was happy, so I just tried to be supportive. She moved into his house in upstate Virginia, and invited my fiance and I to spend a weekend in her new home getting to know her new husband. My mom's new home was pretty isolated. It sat on a few hundred acres of lovely rolling hills and was very picturesque. I was nervous about getting to know this guy, but really trying to make the most of it. Over the course of our first day there, though, I felt more and more uneasy. I didn't think it was weird, just silly. My mom's new husband was being very welcoming and friendly. We were being made to feel very at home, yet I still couldn't shake this oppressive feeling. I finally chalked it up to me being more upset about my mom getting remarried than I was willing to admit to myself. We spent most of the day wandering around outside since I felt worse when indoors. That night, my fiance and I got ready for bed. When I turned my back to him, he stopped talking mid-sentence and asked, "What did you do to your back?" "Well, nothing. Why?" "You have a large bruise." I hopped out of the room to try and see it in a mirror. I got back in to the bathroom, blah, blah, blah. Then it was off to bed. The one window in our room looked out over a pitch black empty field, but I couldn't sleep until I hung something over the window. I felt sure that otherwise someone would watch us through the window. The next morning, I had a complete meltdown. I woke up and just couldn't stop crying. I told my fiance we had to leave. He tried to calm me down by telling me all the things I had been telling myself. My feelings of anxiety were just a result of seeing my mom with someone. The longer I spent with them, the easier it would become, but I just had to leave. It was only Saturday morning, and we were supposed to stay until Monday, but I felt completely hysterical. I knew I was on the verge of a panic attack, and my only concrete thought was that I had to stop crying long enough to make our excuses and get the hell out. We did. As soon as we were on the road, I felt like a weight had been lifted. I was even feeling embarrassed for my behavior, hoping I hadn't insulted my mom's husband by leaving early. Then my fiance broke the silence. That bruise on your back. Did you get a good look at it? I had. It looked like someone had touched the middle of my back with their fingers spread wide, with their hand at a tilt. Ugh. I want to make completely clear, no one had touched my back the previous day, especially hard enough to bruise me. Cut to 3 weeks later, my mom comes to visit. The entire time she's hounding me to stay with her again. After finally trying to change the subject for the 5th time, I level with her. Before I've even finished telling the story, her face is as white as a sheet. She tells me she has been feeling the same way in the house. She hates it. She wants them to move as soon as possible. And the real kicker, her new husband's previous wife died by suicide right outside in the same field our room window overlooked. Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. See you next week. Bye. I'm gonna go lie down now. See ya. Thank you, Reddit. As always, those stories were creepier than I thought they were going to be. So I'm a little shocked here. Back to this week's episode topic, the Napa Valley Murders. And all of the sources that I used for today's episode are in the show notes. So to set the scene, it's Halloween night, 2004, in Napa Valley, also known as California wine country, in a seemingly safe neighborhood. After midnight, one of 3 women living in a house on Dorset Street just dialed 911 and is now on the phone with police dispatch. When police arrive, they find a very gruesome crime scene, and that 2 of the women who were living at the house have been murdered. The crime scene was so gruesome that a female officer felt sick and had to exit the house. Upon entering the house to investigate, police discovered that the murders took place upstairs. There was a large amount of blood on the staircase. The 2 victims were 26-year-old Leslie Mazzara and 26-year-old Adrian Insogna. Outside of the house, investigators found a pile of cigarette butts that did not appear to have been there very long. Additionally, the sole survivor was identified as 28-year-old Lauren Meanza. Lauren's bedroom was located on the 1st floor in the back of the house, while the 2 victims' bedrooms were on the 2nd floor. On the night of the murders, Lauren took a phone call at 10 p.m. and went to her room. Adrian said goodnight to her around 10 p.m. They went to bed around 11 p.m. and by 11:30, the house was quiet. By midnight, all 3 of the roommates were asleep. Lauren would later state in an interview, quote, "I had never heard anything like it. I knew right away that it was something awful." The night of the murders, Lauren went to her bedroom door and she stood in the doorway under the staircase. She could hear a man running down the stairs. Not knowing what to do and thinking she was going to be next, Lauren ran into the backyard. Quote, "I have never felt that terrified, and I thought I was going to die." Lauren would later state that it was quiet in the backyard except for the sound of screaming. She heard a man leave the house, and Adrian's screaming turned into cries for help. When she went back inside of the house, there was, quote, "blood everywhere," and she found Adrian lying next to her bed, dying. Leslie was to the right of Adrian, lying face down in a pile of clothes. Lauren went downstairs and called 911. She would later recount that her life changed forever in a matter of moments after the loss of her friends and roommates. Police began to question Lauren about who would want to kill her roommates. During this time, they discovered that Leslie moved to Napa approximately 6 months earlier and was working at Francis Ford Coppola's vineyard. She was described as very outgoing and spunky, and, quote, "everyone was drawn to her because of her warm southern hospitality." Additionally, Adrian grew up in the Napa Valley area. She was a City of Napa engineer, and she was described as being smart, mellow, and a good friend. So, at the beginning of the investigation, according to police, there was no obvious motive for them to have been murdered. They were well liked, very social, and had many friends. CSI investigated the house for several days, and they determined that the perpetrator entered through a push-up window. Fibers and blood were found by the window. Nothing appeared to be stolen. There were no fingerprints, no weapon, and all of the evidence that they had was sent for testing. The local community of Napa Valley was in shock and disbelief. People were afraid and worried. Investigators did not think they were random murders. This appeared to be a crime of passion, based on the anger and aggression that could be seen in the victim's blood spatter. According to autopsy results, the cause of death for both of the victims was multiple stab wounds. Investigators began to focus on the idea of the killer being an acquaintance of Leslie. Of the two victims, Leslie had the more active social life, and a lot of men were interested in Leslie. 2 weeks after the murders occurred, a candlelight vigil was held in the town of Napa. Furthermore, police began to question hundreds of the victims' male acquaintances, beginning with their inner friend circle. After 3 weeks, investigators had no leads. According to police, Lauren was being very helpful, and she wanted to be informed about what was going on in the investigation. Now back to the crime scene. CSI discovered the blood and DNA of 3 individuals at the scene of the crime. 2 of these individuals were the victims, and the third was the killer, a white male. Police asked all of the victims' male acquaintances to provide DNA samples. Several state and federal agencies became involved, as they were questioning men from multiple cities and states. 6 weeks after the murders, investigators still had no leads. However, some suspects were eliminated from possibility. And now, hold on to your seats, folks. So at this time, investigators are desperate to solve this case. So they decided to meet with a team of psychics. And one of the psychics asked investigators and Lauren, "Who is Lily?" Lauren thought of Lily Prudhomme, Adrian's best friend. However, neither Lauren or police thought anything of it. The investigators and psychics searched the house together. The mediums thought it must be someone that the victims knew. And according to one of the psychics, the term boyfriend kept being mentioned from the other side. Months later, Adrian's best friend, Lily, became engaged to a man named Eric Koppel, who had done work on the dryer at the house where the murders had taken place. Prior in the investigation, Eric's name had not come up. Lily had previously participated in an interview. Out of the 1,000 men police had interviewed, Eric was not one of them. 26-year-old Eric Koppel worked as a land surveyor. Police wanted to do an interview and get his DNA. Investigators also noticed that his photo looked a lot like a sketch that one of the psychics had drawn previously. Unfortunately, Eric was never interviewed because the investigators working on the case had changed. 1 year after the murders, pressure from the community to find the killer began to build, and police had no more leads or tips. The community of Napa Valley was still afraid, and they were worried that this would become a cold case. At this time, police revealed to the public the cigarette brand that had been found in front of the house on the night of the murders. DNA had been found on the cigarette butts, and this DNA matched the blood found at the crime scene. Now, Lauren realized that Lily and her boyfriend, Eric, both smoked, and this stood out to her as not many of their friends smoked. So Lauren gave investigators the name Eric Koppel, and police released to the public the distinctive cigarette brand name of the cigarette butts that were found at the crime scene. And this was Camel Turkish Gold, which also happened to be the brand of cigarettes that Eric smoked. 5 days later, Eric Koppel turned himself in to police. He was quiet in demeanor and accompanied by his wife, Lily. Lauren was shocked. No one in the local community even thought Eric was a suspect. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, lying in wait, and using a knife. According to Lauren, Eric was afraid of losing Lily. He was afraid that Adrian was persuading Lily to leave him. Their wedding had been called off, and Adrian and Lily were planning to go to Australia. On Halloween night 2004, Eric drank heavily at a party and got into a fight with Lily. Several hours later, he broke into the house by entering an unlocked window. It is believed that Adrian was his intended target. More than 2 years later, in January of 2007, Eric Koppel pleaded guilty in court to the murders of Leslie and Adrian. He was accompanied by his wife, Lily, who stated to the court, quote, There is nothing in this world that you could do to make me love you less, end quote. And Eric stated, quote, I am a broken man, end quote. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. And this was able to provide some sense of closure to the family and friends of Leslie and Adrian. And that is the story of the absolutely senseless Napa Valley murders. And my heart goes out to the family and friends of Leslie and Adrian. And best wishes for Lauren, who was also a victim in all this. Absolutely senseless, and this case makes me really mad, honestly. And normally I close out each of these episodes with a quote. And today's quote is very well known. You've probably heard it before, but I think it sums up how I'm feeling right now, and that is, take care of yourselves and each other. I couldn't have said it better myself. So please send me an email at lisaexplains@gmail.com if you would like to send in your suggestions of cases that you would like me to cover next. Thank you again for listening, and have a great week, everybody.